So, today we're going to tackle one of the oldest, and let's be honest, one of the heaviest questions humanity has ever asked. It's a question that challenges faith, philosophy, our very sense of what's right and wrong. We're going to dive into the problem of evil, and specifically the Christian response to it. Years ago, a writer visited the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., and was left with this raw, unavoidable question. I mean, when you're staring into the face of that kind of profound, systematic evil, the murder of millions of people, a question like this isn't just academic, it's deeply personal. And for a lot of people, it's the single biggest obstacle to believing in a good and all-powerful God. So, how do we even begin to unpack this? Well, we're going to walk through it step by step. First, we'll talk about why this is a question for, well, everyone. Then, we'll lay out the classic intellectual problem. After that, we'll look at what's called a thick Christian answer, before making a big pivot to what Christianity says is its ultimate answer, the cross. And finally, we'll see how that shifts the whole conversation from logic to trust. Okay, let's be really clear about something. The problem of evil isn't just for Christians or theologians to worry about. It's a problem for every single one of us. Whether it's a personal tragedy, a natural disaster, or just the cruelty people inflict on each other, suffering is a universal human experience. Every worldview, whether it's religious or secular, has to have some way of making sense of it.
Now, suffering hits us right in the gut, right? It's deeply emotional. But the challenge it poses is often framed as a logical, intellectual problem. For a minute, we need to kind of separate those two things to really understand the argument. So let's just set aside the feeling part for a moment and look at the thinking part.
And here it is, the classic dilemma. The argument basically says you can't have these three things all be true at the same time. 1, God is all-powerful, which means he could stop evil. 2, God is all good, which means he would want to stop evil. And 3, evil exists. That apparent contradiction is the absolute core of the intellectual problem of evil.
And just to add another layer to this, we're actually dealing with two different kinds of evil. You've got moral evil, that's the terrible stuff people choose to do to each other. But then you also have natural evil, the suffering that just seems woven into the world itself, things like cancer, earthquakes, tsunamis. Any complete answer has to try and tackle both.
Okay, so how does Christianity even begin to respond? Well, it's really important to get this. There's no single silver bullet answer. Instead, theologians talk about a thick answer. Think of it less like a single key and more like a toolkit with different interconnected ideas. And why a multi-pronged approach? Simple, really. The problem is just too big, too complex for one neat little explanation. If you try to stretch one idea to cover every single instance of suffering, it breaks. It doesn't work. So instead, Christian thought pulls from several different themes to build a more complete picture. All right, so what's actually in this theological toolkit? Well, the first tool is human freedom. The idea here is that for real love to exist, we have to have real choice. And tragically, that opens the door for people to make evil choices. A second piece is acknowledging spiritual forces, the belief that there are dark, malevolent powers at work in the world. A third concept is the greater good, this idea that God can allow or even redeem suffering for a purpose that we just can't see yet. And finally, the toolkit includes a dose of divine mystery, basically a humble admission that our finite human minds just can't fully wrap themselves around the reasons of an infinite God. And this is a huge turning point in the whole discussion. Because even if those logical defenses kind of work for you, they might not be enough. As this writer puts it, the problem of evil doesn't just challenge whether God exists, it challenges whether God is trustworthy. Can I really put my trust, my life, in the hands of a God who allows so much pain? See, that's a crisis of faith, not just a crisis of logic.
And this is exactly where the Christian response takes a hard turn away from just philosophical arguments and dives deep into theology. It shifts its focus from giving a logical defense to pointing at a specific historical event as its real ultimate answer.
So here's the big reveal. After building up all these logical points, Christianity essentially says its deepest, most profound answer isn't an argument at all. It's not some neat, tidy explanation that makes all the intellectual tension just disappear. It's an event, the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. This is the absolute centerpiece of the Christian faith, and it's presented as the definitive response to the reality of evil and suffering in the world. And that quote really nails the core claim, doesn't it? While other worldviews might imagine a God who's detached from suffering, Christianity makes this unique claim that God, in the person of Jesus, doesn't just watch our pain from a safe distance.
he gets in it. He enters into it. He feels the physical agony, the emotional rejection, even that sense of spiritual abandonment on the cross. The idea is God doesn't just give an answer, he becomes the answer.
So what does this all mean? Well, it completely changes the game. It moves the whole conversation away from being a philosophical puzzle to solve to a lived reality. How does the cross actually change the way a person walks through suffering? It shifts the focus from demanding an explanation to finding a presence.
I mean, listen to this. This is a truly staggering statement from a pastor named Nathan Theory, which he said while he was dealing with cancer. Now, he's not denying the pain. Not at all. He's radically reframing it. For him, that horrific experience actually became a path to a deeper trust in God, a deeper knowledge of God that he says just wouldn't have happened any other way.
So this perspective leads to a totally different way of dealing with pain, right? Instead of just spinning your wheels trying to figure out the why, the focus changes. The advice becomes cling to God's promises about a future where suffering finally ends. It's to seek God's presence right there in the middle of the mess, not just waiting for it to be over. And it's to practice patience, trusting that this painful chapter isn't the end of the story.
And that, right there, is the fundamental shift. The central question for a person of faith whose suffering gets completely transformed. It stops being an angry, demanding, why is this happening to me, and becomes a searching, hopeful, where are you, God, in the middle of this? And the claim is that because of the cross, the answer is always, I'm right here with you.
So that's where we land. If the ultimate Christian response to the darkest parts of life isn't a tidy philosophical argument, but the promise of a God who suffers with us, what does that change? What does that change for how we face our own pain and the suffering we see all around us? Now that is something worth thinking about.